Welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Join us every Wednesday to learn about the latest cutting-edge developments in the real-time communications industry. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSwitch Solutions. Get support and professional services directly from the creators of the FreeSwitch open source project, solving your issues in the most efficient, stable, and scalable way possible. Get the FreeSwitch advantage. Visit freeswitch.com. Also brought to you by ClueCon, the premier technology conference for developers by developers. Join us every summer in Chicago. ClueCon kicks off on Monday with our annual hackathon, The Coder Games, followed by 3 days of technology-rich presentations discussing telecom, WebRTC, and IoT from developers around the world. To learn more, visit ClueCon.com or call 877-74-CLUE.
And welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Today is the 30th of May, 2018. And this week we're joined by Bernard Aboba and Angelina Gambo from Microsoft. They're going to be talking about some WebRTC bits here shortly, so you guys stand by for that. First, let's go over and say hi to Miss Abby in the news. Hi, Abby. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on ClueCon Weekly. So if you have any questions during the call, please comment in the YouTube comments, our HIP chat or IRC channels, and we're going to try to answer them live during this call. So this year, ClueCon is going to be from July 23rd to July 26th. It's a little bit earlier, but you can still register right now on ClueCon.com. And lucky for you, we have a flash sale going on right now. So if you register today, you will save $500 when you use the code CC2018 Ultra Special with a capital U and a capital S. So that's CC2018 Ultra Special with a capital U and a capital S. So make sure you use that code when you register and you could save $500. And when you're done registering, you can check out our schedule that we just posted on our website, and you can see all of the amazing things that you'll be doing this year at ClueCon 2018. You can also see our schedule on the Attendify app. This app is freely available for anyone who's registered for ClueCon, and the trick is the more you post, the more points you get, and more points means you could win a special prize this year. So the sooner you download that, the better. In fact, I just posted on it right before this call, so that's more points for me. If you're planning on staying at the Swiss Hotel during ClueCon, which is where the conference is being held, the last day to do that is on June 30th, which is only a month away, so make sure you get your hotel room as soon as possible. If you can't make it to ClueCon this year, don't fret. We'll be hosting a special ClueCon Weekly episode live from Chicago, so tune in to see that because we have a very fun surprise planned for all of you. FreeSwitch Solutions is also now offering live virtual training. You can learn basic FreeSwitch operations from the comfort of your own home or office. So you can email training@freeswitch.com for more information on that. And please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our mailing list to get even more news from the FreeSwitch team. Thank you for watching. Back to you, Ken.
All right. Thank you very much, Miss Abby. So we're going to go over to Mr. Mavroudis, and he's going to be joined by Bernard and Angelina. How are you guys doing today?
Good, thanks.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hey, doing good. How are you doing?
So today is May 30th, 2018, and Bernard Alboa and Angela Gambo have a presentation that they'd like to present on WebRTC. So would you guys like to start?
Sure. So we'd like to provide you with an update on the status of real-time communications in Microsoft Edge, which, as many of you are aware, just released the Spring 2018 Creators Update. So the Windows 10 platform is available on about 800 million devices today, and they range from embedded devices to the Surface Hub, so a very wide range of devices. If you want to do native real-time communications development, we have the UWP, WebRTC, and ORTC lib SDKs that run across the full range. And Edge also runs across the full range of devices, including the Xbox platform. So you can develop on that as well. Now, in terms of the current status of the platform, Edge supports the latest JavaScript innovations, things like asm.js and async functions. A lot of the HTTP developments, such as HTTP2, server push, live streaming, and strict transport security. We also support the H.264 AVC and BP8 video codecs for use in RTC applications, a full suite of audio codecs, Opus, G711, DTMF, and Comfort Noise. And you can capture video and audio through the Media Capture and Streams API, otherwise known as Get User Media. We support the Web Audio API, as well as WebVR, speech synthesis via the Web Speech API, and the TLS and DTLS 1.2 protocols with support for elliptic curves. Now, in the spring 2018 Creators Update, we've added support for screen capture, and we're going to be talking about that today. We also support the Streams API, the VP9 playback, which is decoder only, WebGL, Canvas 3D, and the WebM container format. And, of course, the WebRTC 1.0 and ORTC APIs, WebSockets, Web Speech Synthesis, and Web Notifications. So, what are we working on? What's on the roadmap? Well, in development currently, we have TLS 1.3. We're also working on Quick, which utilizes the TLS 1.3 handshake. So that's coming. We're working on the OGG container. And there are a number of things which are under consideration. And as you may have noticed on the platform site, you can vote for the ones you want. So some of the popular ones that people have asked for are RTC data channels, Web Speech API, that's speech recognition, Media Recorder, and then Media Capture from Canvas or from the HTML media element, and the Audio Output Devices API. So those are things we're looking at for future releases.
And the cool thing is you guys can check this out whenever you want on the developer.microsoft.com website. There's a link for Microsoft Edge platform status, and that's where all this info is actually updated real time. And you can live vote for things that you want to see in the platform, and these votes actually are taken back to the platform team, and it helps us figure out what we need to build next. It's kind of cool. So the next thing we want to talk about is what's new in Edge in 2018 Creators Update is we have the Screen Capture API that's defined by the W3C Screen Capture spec. Edge is actually the first browser to implement this standard, so that's kind of cool. We are able to use this API to capture application windows and displays without a plugin, extensions, or whitelist. So there's nothing additional. You just call the API and you get screen capture. This is pretty nice. When you call Get Display Media, this is our new capture API off of the Navigator object, we return back a promise, so you can continue to do other work. We're not going to hang your UI thread. And the cool thing is the Get Display Media API returns back also just like a media stream object, so you're able to use the stream however you want to do it. You can use it in ORTC on Edge, and your screen capture frames can be sent over the wire. It's currently not supported in WebRTC 1.0 on Edge, but that's something that we have under consideration as well. As a developer, you can also set the degradation preferences and max frame rates in ORTC to optimize your capture encoding. Let's see. So also, cool, this is a little sample we have here too, just showing how easy it is to call that API. As you can see, the constraints don't actually influence the selection, and that's because at the time of the spec was specified, constraints weren't really clearly defined, so we chose not to have them at this time. As the spec evolves, these are things we will take into consideration. So as a developer, when you call Get Display Media, you actually are invoking a consent prompt for the user to say, yes, I want this website to be able to do screen capture. This is really similar to the permissions that we see today for like audio, for media, microphone, and camera. So let's say the user hits yes, they want your website to do capture. What's next? Well, what we have is a system picker control where the user gets to pick exactly what they want to capture, be it an application window or a display. So this picker is actually a system UI prompt that the platform draws for you. And then the user gets to choose what they want to do. So the cool thing about this picker is we are doing per application window capture, which means the user selects a window like Notepad, or a UWP application they have running, and just frames from that window are included in capture. This is a little different from what you see today from other Win32 applications or other browsers doing screen capture today. Today you see people trying to do per window capture, but you get occluded content or blacked out content on top of the window. That's because they're not actually getting the frames of the window itself. The power behind this API is the ability to actually get true application windows. And how we do that is by using this new WinRT API called graphics capture, which is really awesome. It's the same functionality, but you can actually call it through Win32 and UWP. So the cool thing about this per window capture is we capture all application window types. Win32, UWP, modern apps, it's all there, unless the application decides it does not want to be captured. So basically, we respect DRM and privacy settings that are on Windows. So they'll either not be included in the picker control itself, or if it has DRM content in the window, we'll render it black, meaning we drop the frames. This is all for security reasons. So now that the user has selected the thing they want to capture, how do they know what's being captured? Well, the system handles this as well with a security yellow border around the item that's being captured. You see this kind of today with Skype. If you use Skype, you see a yellow border. Some applications do this, some don't actually. The reason why we have the system draw the yellow border is so the user definitely knows what's being captured at all times. So unfortunately, it's not customizable right now, but that's something we're also considering. You'll just get a standard yellow border. Another cool thing about doing per window capture with Edge is that window can go to the background, and you can be doing other things on your screen that's not going to be included in those captured frames. So you can have your screen capture of your PowerPoint in your background and then open Notepad and take some notes as you're doing a meeting, and it won't be included. One thing to be aware of, though, if you do minimize the window that's being captured, it's no longer rendering frames, so the stream will just return black. That's just an optimization, or not optimization, a thing that we know that happens. So that's basically screen capture summarized for you guys. Hopefully you guys can try it out off of Get Display Media in Edge. It's in the spring 2018 Creators Update, and so we'd really love to get your feedback and see how it's going for you. Anything else?
Yeah, and also you can, of course, try out the Win10 API for your own applications.
Yeah.
And we're trying to convince lots of people to use it, including other browsers.
Yeah, so for sure, try it out in ORTC for now, and hopefully it'll be available elsewhere in the future. So we're open to questions. If you guys have anything you want to ask us. Or is that a little too fast?
So how does the multiplexing work?
Oh, so multiplexing. So basically, when you do screen capture, you're getting back a media stream. And as a developer, you can take multiple media streams together and combine them as you choose to do so with standard media APIs in Edge or HTML.
Yeah, so there's no limitation on, you can run, for example, get user media and screen capture, have two streams to send if you want.
Okay, and then so does that work into the security layer too? I mean, how would something like that? I mean, there would have to be some security associated with the different streams, right? Or is it on a different layer?
Well, so there's a couple of issues there. There's the streams will always be protected by SRTP and then the DTLS key management. If you're referring to identity, there's only one browser which implements that today, which is Firefox. So you won't know who the origin is, that it's, for example, Angelina or Bernard sending it to you. But it is protected in the sense that the media will be encrypted.
Right.
And,
right. And so I was thinking more along the DRM content and that type of stuff.
Oh, so you don't get any notification back as to what's included in your capture frames, unfortunately. If you're capturing DRM content, or you're trying to, like I said, it will render black in your frames. Or if the window itself is marked as protected, it just won't be included as an object to be selected in the picker. But unfortunately, you do not get any information back right now saying like, hey, this is the window you're capturing and it has these policies on it. This is due to security reasons. We don't want to give away too much information about what's going on a user's system to a website right now.
Yeah, so the W3C screen capture API doesn't give the application the ability to select what window. That's totally up to the user. And also, it does return potentially, although we don't support it right now, whether the user selected a window or a display. It does tell you that, but it doesn't tell you what app was selected. So, for example, the application can't know that you are running your banking app in a window and then try to get you to capture that.
Okay, and then you mentioned the term like the WebM container format. What is that?
Well, these are container formats for various codecs. That's more for the streaming media side of things, doesn't really influence WebRTC, but it is also relevant for things like Media Recorder. When we get to that, you may want to record to different container formats, different codecs, things of that nature. Basically, we're committed to supporting all the popular containers that are in all the other browsers. And as I said, we support the BP8 and H.264 codecs. So we also have pretty good codec support as well, both in audio and video.
So you guys like wrapping it in Opus?
Yeah, so we support, for the RTC platform, we support Opus, but also it's possible to stream Opus as well. Media Recorder, there'll probably be an interest in being able to record Opus. So basically, Opus is a full-fledged member of the Edge codec family, and we support it in every kind of scenario right now. Yeah, VP9, as I mentioned, is something that's only for streaming media at the moment. We don't support it in the RTC platform. But as an example, if you wanted to stream a movie or something, we do support VP9 decoding.
And then also, you mentioned, speech has always been something that I've always been very interested in, and the real-time processing of speech and that type of stuff. There's a lot of things that can be very cool that can be done. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, so one of the things we find is now that we've got the basics of WebRTC in the platform, a lot of the creativity comes from people combining different web APIs. So, for example, you may have seen cool demos, for example, of WebRTC combined with Canvas or combined with WebGL or combined with Web Audio. So one thing in particular, Microsoft is very committed to accessibility nowadays. And so things like speech synthesis and speech recognition can allow you to do some very interesting scenarios, such as speech to text, so somebody can be speaking either remotely or locally, and then you're putting out the text so that somebody who might not be able to hear them can understand what's going on. And so we have the speech synthesis today, and of course we have this very sophisticated AI capability that we advertise in Azure, computer vision, translation, and all of that. And so these are the kind of things that we'd be looking to make available on the web, and there is this speech recognition API that we can presumably integrate into the platform.
Mm-hmm. So
how
far away?
We have the ability to recognize speech in many languages.
Yeah.
And so how far are we from like that, Star Trek walkie-talkie that you could just kind of talk into?
Well, if you've played with the Skype
any language.
If you've played with a Skype translator, it's actually a pretty amazing thing. It can translate quite a few languages, and it does work. I remember when I first saw it, I thought, "Wow, this is not what I expected. I didn't expect this to work the way as well as it does." So I'm not going to speak to when that'll be available in the Edge platform, but I will say overall, I've been amazingly surprised by the progress on machine learning. Mm-hmm. It almost seems, frankly, a little bit spooky. Because when I was in school, we were trying to do all of this stuff and it didn't work a tenth as well as it does today.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's progress for you, though, right?
Yeah.
I think back then we just didn't have the core processing power, right?
Well, that was true too. I think we also didn't, have understand the power of neural networks. They were kind of a marginal technology, frankly. Yeah. So I think as all of these things start to come together, the platform will be much more powerful when you're able to use all these APIs in concert. And I think that's some of the coolest demos I've seen involve lots of different APIs and bring them all together.
Yep.
So what are the more impressive demos that you've seen?
Well, I'm kind of a more of a meat and potatoes kind of person. So some of the coolest demos I've seen would involve kind of accessibility features. I think Skype Translator, although it's not a WebRTC demo yet, I think that's just impressive. Just being able to translate languages, being able to give you a reasonable transcription of a meeting, those kind of things, personally, I think are good. There's a lot of flashy gaming scenarios. I see people doing amazingly cool things. You see people integrating games, for example, where people talk to each other during the game, and of course they have amazing effects and things of that nature. I've seen some cool WebGL demos where people they put your face on a cube and rotate the cube.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not that useful in a business
creative.
context.
Well, they'll find usefulness.
People do. I know the funny hat scenarios, although they're not that useful in a business setting. They can. You can do facial detection now, and actually, there's a couple of blog entries I've seen where they basically use the media capture and then send this off to CNTK, and they can recognize rabbits or animals or your face and stuff like that.
Right, put a little mustache or a hat on someone.
Yeah. But the recognition, I think you may have seen some of the demos we've done at Build where we actually can recognize when somebody's using, for example, a construction tool that they're not authorized to use. So we can actually recognize the person
and the object.
Yep. And tie them together and figure out, oops, you weren't trained on how to use a jackhammer. You shouldn't be doing that.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard of use cases like that. I like that.
Really
for
cool
just general safety and stuff.
Cool.
Or even better, with all this stuff that's going on with the schools and stuff, just having the cameras being able to, as an early warning system.
Yeah.
Power machine learning as well. They can identify and make associations. So there's a lot of cool technology out there that's coming.
Yeah.
And coming to the web, hopefully.
That's one of the things that's so great about it is the fact that you don't have to install software anymore. It could just work in the browser.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's kind of what we did with the screen capture API. It's an API that works in the browser and also natively on your PC. So it's the same experience everywhere. And the APIs are very similar as well. So for a developer, it makes your life a lot easier if you are developing across platform or across devices.
Yeah, although I guess you mentioned
we need to have other browsers too.
Eventually.
There now that we've done it, we've heard interest from other browser vendors. I know Safari is working on Get Display Media. We've been chatting with folks in Firefox as well. So I think you'll see it, and you may have noticed that other browsers are also getting rid of, for example, Firefox no longer has a whitelist, no longer requires extensions or plugins. So that's kind of the general movement. Is this API has kind of addressed some of the security issues that allow screen sharing to be more easily integrated without a lot of the issues that we'd had.
Yeah, it removes the overhead of the extension model, which has been really cumbersome and hard for developers to expand across different browsers. So by having a unified standard for screen capture, hopefully it'll make their lives a lot easier.
Oh, and a unified security too, right?
Oh, exactly, yeah. Having a secure model that relies on the system to have the UI drawn for them that someone else can't manipulate is also really awesome. So you know what's happening at all times as someone sharing your screen. Also, I forgot to mention that when you're sharing your screen or your application window, I mentioned the yellow border that's drawn around the object that's being shared. That yellow border actually isn't in the shared streams. So as the viewer, you don't see the yellow border. So it might look like a little ugly to you as the presenter. What's this yellow border drawing around my window? But it's good that you know it's there.
It's actually very useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty useful. I personally like it. So when I'm sharing my screen, I know exactly what's being shared at all times. But it's also nice that it's not in the frames. And as a developer, I don't have to crop or do some magic to cut it out. It's just not in the frames.
I mean, just how many times have you been in a conference and those Facebook pop-ups show up, or like
Oh, yeah.
software
Yeah.
updates show up while you're up on the screen? I
You
mean,
see a lot
it's
of
not the same, but
Yeah.
to a certain extent, it can happen, right?
Yeah, you see a lot of apps trying to work around this by actually sniffing the window location of the window someone wants to capture and then cropping down the full screen to that window. But then if you have a pop-up or something goes on top of it, that's included in the cropped region. So it's captured, which is just weird for the viewer. The viewer's like, oh, I thought I was looking at a window. And all of a sudden this, toast comes up. What the heck? What is that? But with the new screen capture APIs, you don't get that functionality, which is great because you don't want overlapping content to show. Some developers will choose to black it out, which is also confusing. So now I know something's on top of the window I'm trying to see, but now it's black and I don't know why. So you get to avoid all that mess with the new API, which is really nice. And once again, no new code change for the developer to do this. It's just for free. They don't have to play magic and tricks with cropping.
Yeah, so the great thing about Edge is this is not just a new API from the W3C, it's also new underlying technology in Windows so that the overall experience is going to be better.
Yep, exactly.
So we got a question from the audience, and so it's about like input devices. How do input devices actually affect this? So like, if the mouse crosses over the area, will that be displayed? And how does
right now, your input devices are included in the captured frames, so your mouse cursor will be included. There are some explorations that we're looking at of like maybe we should have the developer can say include mouse or not, or include ink or not. Right now you get it if it's on top of the window, or if it's like part of the window, you'll get your inking, you'll get your mouse cursor. So that's the first level of functionality. But we are looking at other ways to customize the stream.
And so what do you think? Because, well, you had the votes for the new features that are upcoming features. What's the highest priority, and what are we going to see in the future?
Well, there's so many important things. I think expanding media capture would be really awesome. Very similar to what you were talking about. Like, how do I mux all these things together in a useful way? The media capture APIs are really powerful, and we would love to include capture in media capture, canvas capture. There's a lot of other things that we want to include in that, and so if I had a wish list that I could do anything, I would want to work on that next.
Yeah. So that's like short-term roadmap, right? And then where's the long-term roadmap?
Long-term roadmap. We want every website to work beautifully in all browsers.
Yeah, I mean, WebRTC 1.0, you may have seen some of the progress indicators. No browser implements all of it today.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the parts of the WebRTC 1.0 API that browsers do implement are quite different between browsers. So one of the pushes we're making in the WebRTC working group is to try to get implementation experience on the entire API. So it's always interesting to have that discussion with the W3C because it's been a long time. We've been working on WebRTC 6 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty long even for a W3C spec. And so we're going up for recharter, and our goal is to actually get all of this API implemented by 2 browsers, every feature. So I certainly hope that's part of the long-term future.
Yeah, I mean, like Bernard is saying, our goal is to make the life easier on the developer. It's ridiculous you have to if-def every single page you want to do, and hopefully in the RTC space we can make it easier. So we are working with the other browsers to try to close down on the standard and what should it really mean for all browsers, and then get people on board to actually implement it. Edge as well, like we're trying.
Yeah, I mean, Edge in particular was the first to implement the object API that's in WebRTC 1.0.
Yep.
And now other browsers are implementing that API as well. So we're working through all of the implications and potential ambiguities in that part of the spec. But you will start to see those object capabilities in Edge now be available on other browsers, hopefully in the next year.
So uniformity is almost like a potential reality, huh?
Well, I think the first potential reality would just be everybody implementing it. Then we'll understand whether they're uniform or not.
Yeah, just because you implement the same APIs doesn't mean they always behave the same way.
Yeah. And then on top of that, there's interoperability. Once you're uniform in the API, do they actually put out the same packets and can you talk? So WebRTC is significantly more complicated I like to say that there are more protocol functionality in WebRTC than in all the other W3C specs combined. So it's a pretty big.
That makes sense why it takes so long to get through it. So like, how do you guys share test units and stuff like that?
Well,
And how do
the test functionality is still in its infancy. If you look at the WebRTC specs, you'll see a pointer to the WPT framework. Those tests just got to a reasonable coverage level last year, but that's only APIs of a single browser. There are still some issues in the WPT test frameworks. And Dr. Alex Gouillard of Cosmo Consulting has just had to develop a new interoperability test framework known as Kite in order to test more than one browser against other browsers in interop scenarios, and also to test some of the more sophisticated functionalities such as conferencing and simulcast. And that work is really in its infancy. We just have a few tests, although Alex is working on others involving multiple browsers, conferencing servers, stuff like that. So I'd say the test framework is just in its beginning stages. And that also will need to get significantly better if we're going to have production software having millions of people, and allow browser vendors to avoid regressions, which are unfortunately kind of a fact of life today.
Right. And so is there any ways that you could potentially shim up some of this stuff?
Well, so the adapter.js shim keeps progressing, and it keeps getting better and better. It should be understood that shim basically is there to support things that are in all browsers. So people ask, for example, when are we going to get display media in the adapter.js shim? And the answer is when enough browsers support get display media, then that goes into adapter.js, but not before. And if you look at the differences in the way that browsers do screen sharing, you could see why it's not at all obvious how you would shim that in a single get display media API, particularly for browsers that don't natively support that.
Yep.
So it is today. I mean, it's great that FreeSwitch is using Adapter, I think, very successfully. It doesn't cover all WebRTC scenarios, particularly in the object space, although it keeps getting better and better. For example, I think it does support add transceiver now. So hopefully in the next year and a half, you'll see Adapter.js expand to a much wider set of scenarios.
So being like the trailblazers into the screen capture stuff, does that mean that you somehow get involved in the shim work as well? Or is that something that's completely independent, or is there some form
we talk to the people who work on it. Like I said, it's not just up to us whether something is shimmable. Shims are for everybody, for all browsers. So we certainly we help everybody who has questions about the API. And so, although it's not particularly a complicated API, so those conversations haven't been very long. They're just a couple of minutes usually to get people working.
Yeah, so we work with these shim layers so they're aware of how to use it on our browser, and work with the other browsers to see if they can be included as well. But the shim, hopefully we can have the capture in the shim soon. We just need one more browser to opt in to use this API.
Yeah, it's worth saying that this development has actually involved quite a bit of work at the system level and as well as in Edge.
Yeah, to bring this new screen capture functionality to life on the native platform, we actually had to do a lot of work in the OS first. It took several years actually to get this per window capture functional. In order to capture a modern application window, that was a lot of work in itself because that was a new thing that's actually never supported before. You try to screen capture Calculator today, for example, which is a modern app on desktop. Can't do it without our new API. So once we had that in the platform, then we brought it up to the browser layer, which took more time. So it's a staged process. Yeah.
And Angelina has already, contacted a lot of the other browser vendors. We're very willing to help them come up to date on this API. So hopefully we'll not only see Get Display Media, but also this new Win 10 API used on all the browsers running on Windows.
So what about sharing? Right? Can this be adapted for sharing?
So
for
the frames that you're capturing for screen capture and share through ORTC today on Edge. If you're calling it natively through Win32 or UWP application, you can do whatever you want with these frames. The WinRT API gives back the raw frames instead of a capture stream, like Edge does. Edge gives you streams that you can then mux as you want with other media streams. But in WinRT, you get individual frames that you can then use with Win2D and scribble on them if you wanted to, synchronize with audio, synchronize with whatever media you have going on, and encode it as you choose to do so, and share it if you wanted to through any type of networking service, or save to disk or encode into a certain video file type if you want. So it's pretty
But what
open.
about could it turn into like almost like a VNC? So with the or RDP, or with actual input devices, right?
So right now it's just frames. It doesn't do anything regarding input injection, but that is a thing that we were looking at and talking to a lot of customers, especially in the browser. If people want to do remote assistance, they want to be able to share their screen and also give control over. So right now the Get Display Media API itself does not do that, but with other APIs of input injection that we'll have to look more into the standards, what's part of the standards today or not, it could be used this way.
That's
so there's lots of options to do with it.
Yeah. One thing Angelina mentioned that's kind of important when you capture a screen share is very often there are special techniques used to optimize that encoding. And that's why Angelina mentioned in particular the degradation preference setting, which is both in WebRTC 1.0 and ORTC. And you choose something called maintain resolution, and that gives you an encoding which is optimized for a screen share. So you're basically telling the encoder, hey, I want to give you the maximum resolution possible so you could see text, for example, in your screen share, as opposed to optimizing for motion, which might make sense for sports video or something, but wouldn't be that good for a presentation.
That's interesting. So how is that implemented or within the API? Or?
Yes, it is. It is. That's one of the reasons why we started with ORTC, because we had that degradation preference control. So a similar thing, by the way, is in Chrome for their screen capture. They call it content hints, but it's essentially a hint that you give to the encoder to tell it what kind of thing it is. In the case in there, it's on Chrome, it's detail versus motion, which is more or less the same as the degradation preference of maintain resolution versus maintain frame rate.
So how does packet loss, how is that taken into account here?
Well, it's a screen capture is like any other frame when it's transmitted, in that you can have loss as you would in, for example, a video captured from a camera. When you have that, the underlying feedback mechanisms come into account. For example, we support in Edge something called NAC, which means that if we send a screen capture frame and the other side doesn't get it, they'll send an indication of frame loss back to us. And then we also support retransmission, so that we will retransmit that missing packet or packets. Now, one thing we do not support in Edge today is forward error correction, which is another way to improve the robustness. So as with any video, it's probably a good idea to have a robustness strategy and to turn on the retransmission so that you can recover.
Yeah, FEC amazing. I mean, you see some of the results of FEC, and I mean, it's a drastic differential.
Yeah, the distinction is RTX is better if your round trip time is small. It's more effective because you don't pay any cost unless you actually have loss. Whereas forward error correction is better for the high delay situation because it has a continuing cost that you pay even if you don't have loss.
Oh, that's interesting. And so, in the future, would you be able to almost swap between the two, or can they both be?
Well, I've seen papers that talk about adjustment between the two, based on estimates of RTT. Mm-hmm. I'm not aware of anyone who's actually implemented that in a browser. And typically, you turn on use one or the other in a given situation. Like using both would be kind of difficult and would give you the worst of both worlds.
So what about like device? Can you talk a little bit about device fingerprinting and that type of stuff in Edge?
I'm not too familiar myself with the device fingerprinting identification.
Yeah. So as you probably know, the W3C is very concerned with privacy. And so we often get developers complaining to us about aspects of get user media. As an example, until the user gives permission, you can't enumerate devices. And the reason for that is they don't want drive-by applications that enumerating all the devices, because you can use that to essentially tell who someone is. And you think, wow, is that really true? But as an example, in this room, we're using a particularly odd set of devices, a Logitech camera combined with certain devices that's only on the Surface device, and then we have a Jabra speakerphone. And when you combine all of this, you can probably tell that somebody's in a conference room, maybe even what kind of conference room they're in. Mm-hmm. So it is a kind of a spooky thing. And so permission is really required before you can get that information. Once the user does get permission, then you can enumerate the devices and get the labels and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that's the logic behind it. And it's some of the same logic probably around the screen capture, why you can't figure out, at least in the W3C APIs, all of the applications someone is running on their machine.
Yeah, so there is actually no standard API or plans for an API to do programmatic enumeration of application windows, kind of like how you can programmatically enumerate today your display devices or your audio devices, right? We don't plan on having that based on security reasons. Just like Bernard said, we don't want the website to get too much access to know what's going on your system. You have a banking app open or you have calculator open. They don't need to know these things, and they really shouldn't know these things. And that's why we wrap it in a picker, which is a system picker. So without programmatic enumeration, websites really can't create custom picking experiences, and that's by design due to security concerns.
Yeah. So we get developers who are a little frustrated. They'll say, hey, as an example, it is an encoding problem in that when the picker allows somebody to pick something, they might pick a game. They want to share a game. Yeah. Or they might pick a PowerPoint presentation. Those two things have very different encoding characteristics, and they need to be optimized differently. So it's a little frustrating for the developer because they don't know, and then they'll say, well, how do you know I should set degradation preference or prefer resolution? The user just selected a game. Mm-hmm. It should have been maintained frame rate, but you don't give me the information to know. So yes, they are frustrated, but we think we have good reasons why we didn't want them to know that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And then what about like IP leakage and that type of stuff?
Well, so that's kind of another, a different kind of level of discussion. In Edge, the way we do it is we have a setting that you can actually set in the browser to minimize the leakage. There's been some recent work because we've seen another drive-by applications that try to snarf people's VPNs and IP addresses. So there's a bunch of recommendations now that the IETF is making surrounding privacy in situations where the user doesn't explicitly set their browser to be private. But currently that's how we do it in Edge, is we let the user kind of permanently have a privacy setting that can protect them. So, because we think that people who care about that are likely to have that be persistent. So we don't want to necessarily require them to understand what the situation is and, think through whether they've given consent and the implication of all that. But, one of the things we learned from the web is that if people can learn things about you from the APIs, they will use them.
Yeah.
Even in applications which seem that they should have no use for this. As an example today, WebRTC is very widely used in applications that don't use audio or video. And maybe that's just about data channel, but it also is a little bit disturbing because we suspect that it's apps that don't even use that.
Yeah.
They just spy on people, basically.
Or try to, at least.
So it's just embedded, and there's really no way to detect it. I mean, if you really think about it, besides some type of pop-up that would
the
show
thing
up.
was, people ask us, why didn't you have permission for creating a peer connection or opening an ORTC object? And the answer to that is that would be incredibly difficult for a developer. If you think about it, if every object you created brought up a permission dialog, the first problem is that the constructors are synchronous. So it would block the UI thread when you did this. And also, if the user, you could be constructing dozens of objects and you put up a permission for every object you make.
Cumbersome.
it's really very cumbersome. So it's not actually, that's not actually a viable way to protect people's privacy. And so that's why we concentrated on things like the screen capture and the media capture to be, that's the place where you ask for the permission. And so in some of the thinking people are doing, you're thinking, well, should we link those permissions to other behaviors? You know, for example, in a situation where someone didn't give any permission for screen capture or anything, you know, what should we allow to run before any permissions are given? So that's what some of the new thinking is about, to kind of take a situation where there's no permissions at all and have additional privacy protections.
So what about like ICE candidates and stuff? Can that be used as well for leakage?
Well, that's really one of the central issues in this privacy debate, is the ability to enumerate ICE candidates of all types. And that's how, as an example, there was a concern about enumerating VPN candidates. So maybe you're a dissident, you're trying to conceal your address, and through ICE, it discovers, hey, this person has an ICE VPN candidate, and now we know where they're coming in from. It's not just the address they got from the VPN, which maybe looks like they're in another city or another country. You can say, hey, this person is actually here. They're located in this portion of the city. So that's what sparked a lot of the debate, is when it was discovered that apps, I'm talking about just like newspaper apps, were actually sniffing these IP addresses and using them to determine people's location. So that's what set off a lot of the debate. And so a lot of the questions have been about, under what situation should you hide this? You know, do the permissions that you give allow some of this information to be provided? If you don't give permission via get user media, should they be automatically hidden? But in Edge, basically, when you go into the privacy mode, all of that information will not be made available under any circumstance, whether you give permission or not.
Okay.
So it's kind of a very drastic approach that we're taking to allow people to have maximum privacy if you have that setting.
Right, but if you're not requesting any of the hardware like you mentioned before, then there's going to be no permission sets associated with it, right?
Well, that's the issue, is that a lot of these drive-by apps, because they really weren't about communications at all, they were about snooping. They never triggered the get user media prompt or the screen sharing prompt. And so the user had no idea they were running, and yet it was sniffing all the IP addresses and using it to determine where the person was. So, you know, of course, in the W3C, when you call a location API, you also get a permission prompt. But because IP addresses are a surrogate for location, a lot of apps were using sneaky ways to essentially avoid putting up the location prompt. So anyway, I think the message is, if you leak too much information, people will use it in ways that you probably wouldn't approve of. And that's why the W3C, they require a privacy and security review for every spec. And they go over it pretty thoroughly.
And then we're seeing it come down from a regulatory perspective too now. So it's not just that. There's governments and that are starting to get, you know, very cognizant of what information is shared and how you intend to protect it. Right? I
would say in many ways the concerns of technical people have now become very widely understood in society. I mean, I remember, you know, W3C has been very active in this area for years, and I think those concerns now people are more aware of them globally.
Okay, well, thank you for coming in today. Really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. I mean, it's great to see. It's great to see the video components. I mean, or the sharing components. It's, you know, impressive. So thank you for doing some trailblazing there, or some recent trailblazing, right? In the RTC field, which is always wonderful. So I think we're going to take some questions from the audience, but we'll turn it back to Ken. Back to you. Jen?
I sat here and unmuted my mic and accidentally remuted it instead. I was going to say, Bernard or Angelina, is there any other things that you guys want to get out there while we look for questions over here?
I would really encourage people to try out the screen sharing functionality in ORTC. And if you do have issues, if you go to developer.microsoft.com and then Internet Explorer, or sorry, Edge, Edge, we have this issues tab where if you find issues, please file them and let me know, because actually I get those and I would love to see what issues anyone's having and happy to help solve them. Because we would love folks to start playing around with it. We play around with it a lot ourselves, but we want to see how other people are going to try to use it, because it's the web. There's a million ways to try using anything out there. So exciting to see the feedback.
You're never going to get a full picture until it really goes out to millions of people.
It's amazing how people sometimes give feedback. They're just like, oh, I tried to do this with that. I'm like, why? Okay, sure. I'll see if I can make that work.
Well, as a developer, you guys know users find new and interesting ways to break our software. Yeah. Yep. All the time. And so I would love to hear it. And if you guys have any feedback in regards of like missing functionalities or things you'd like to see, these are great things to hear. And we are involved in the standards bodies as well. So we would love to take this feedback and bring it back to the standards and see if this is a thing that other browsers would be interested in supporting too.
So we have a question from the audience, which is actually right in the application here in the communicator. And the question is there a way to sync a data channel with an audio channel?
Well, I should mention Edge doesn't currently support the data channel. And this is an interesting question because we have heard this before. And the issue is that you may recall there have been uses of something called an RTP data channel. Chrome supported this at one point. Other applications have supported an RTP data channel. And one of the characteristics of an RTP data channel is you now have timestamps that can be synced with audio and video. But that never made its way into the WebRTC standard because we have SCTP data channels. So currently, I don't believe you could, of course, create an RTP packet and send it down that SCTP data channel, but that by itself wouldn't cause syncing within the engine. So I think, you basically have to do it kind of ad hoc, and I don't believe there's any current way to sync. We have heard requests in the WebRTC working group to kind of develop that capability more, but yeah, it's not part of the standard, although people have done it outside of the standard.
Okay, and so another question we have is, does the Verto demo work in Edge now? And if I remember correctly, you actually substantially assisted with that, right?
Yeah, well, it does, of course, it does work, and in fact, we tested it in Edge before we came on. So yes, what we like to work with the FreeSwitch team on is getting this new screen sharing to work, which it doesn't do. But the basic video functionality works through adapter. And I think you guys should tell us, but I think it works well basically on all browsers, including Edge.
Yeah, I can address that real quick. As Bernard said, we use Adapter.js for support on the various browsers, so it does work in all 4 major browsers now, including Edge. So it's there. You guys go and use it. The screen sharing, as Bernard said, we don't have that with Edge yet. Since that's brand new. But that's something that I'm sure if you guys want to see that, you can let the team know. And
the issue there is it isn't part of Adapter yet because all the browsers have such different screen sharing models that doing a shim that would expose a uniform interface isn't possible yet because they're so different. But they are starting to converge. So hopefully in some period of time we'll have similar models at least, and then shimming will be possible.
Right, yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Where's he?
I think we're about out of questions there.
All right, well, guys, thank you for coming in today. Question, are you coming to ClueCon?
Well, I think we'll be available remotely.
Yep.
So we can join the browser panel
Yeah.
if you invite us.
Yeah,
Well, there's definitely a space. There's definitely a space for you guys without any question. So
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us. This has been a great opportunity to share the functionalities that we have in Edge and where we want to go with it.
yeah, and it's good. It's kind of great to see the roadmaps as well, and see kind of where everything's going. You get a little bit of a future view of what potentially could be happening in the future.
Yeah. And
we can
stay tuned on the platform status page. We have those updated constantly as things progress.
And it's actually it's great that you actually go out to the community and prompt the community for what they want to see.
Yeah, I mean, we are building these features for you guys, so let us know what you want and need. We also shared some links with you guys on the blog post that Bernard and I wrote for screen sharing, and also a post for calling the WinRT API. So feel free to take a look at those links. I think they'll be associated with this video. So if folks want to take a look at those, the posts have some information and samples that can help get people started.
Yeah, and also we have a GitHub site where we have this presentation and ORTC documentation and roadmap slides and lots of stuff, and we provided that link to you as well.
Yep.
All
right. Thank you, guys. Back to you, Ken.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, Bernard, Angelina, Michael. As Michael said, we'll be getting those links posted up on the YouTube video so you guys can see all those, and you'll see those down in the comments. So also don't forget to click that subscribe button down below the video, and then you'll see the little bell icon there. Click that, and you'll get the notifications when we're live. So you can come back and get your questions asked on air with with people that are coming up. So next week, I believe we're going to have Mr. Jim O'Brien from Counterpath. You guys know you guys may not know Jim, but he's one of the minds behind Bria and Xlite, and he's been with Counterpath for a while. So he's going to be coming in and talking to us about what they've been working on. So you guys join us back here next Wednesday at noon U.S. Central Time, and we'll see you then. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Thanks, Ken.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central. Keep up with the latest happenings by subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit us at freeswitch.com.